What if I told you there's a question buried in the Bible that even theologians hesitate to answer? It's not about God or creation or even the meaning of life. It's about Cain. After he murdered his brother Abel, the Bible says he was cursed and banished. But just a few verses later, he has a wife, a child, a legacy. Wait, what? Where did this wife come from? There were no other humans, no cities, no sisters ever mentioned. So either the Bible skipped a massive detail, or there's something we're not being told. What if Cain's mysterious wife is the key to unraveling a hidden layer of the Bible? A loophole so strange it could change the way we see the origins of humanity forever. Let's go deeper, because this isn't just a story about murder. It might be the first clue in a much bigger secret. The book of Genesis is one of the most well-known religious texts ever written, and yet few people really read it line by line. In Genesis chapter 4, Cain murders Abel. God exiles Cain to the land of Nod. Then, out of nowhere, it says, "Then Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch." But no one explains where this wife came from. She's just there, like an uninvited guest at a cosmic dinner party. If you pause here, the math doesn't add up. Genesis had only introduced Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. No mention of daughters, no mention of other humans. So where did she come from? Here's what most people overlook. Genesis 5:4 says, "After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters." There it is, sons and daughters, plural, which means Adam and Eve had more children than just Cain, Abel, and Seth. But the Bible didn't list their names. Why? Maybe they weren't considered relevant to the male-dominated narrative, or maybe it was intentional silence. That changes everything. It means Cain could have married his sister, or even his niece. Disturbing? Maybe. But in ancient times, when humanity was supposedly just beginning, there were no taboos on incest. That came much later in religious law, so technically, problem solved, right? Not quite, because now we're asking a different kind of question. Here's where things get wild. Some ancient Jewish texts and modern interpretations suggest a different theory. What if Cain wasn't the son of Adam at all? Some fringe scholars and apocryphal sources argue that Cain's real father was the serpent. Yes, that serpent. They claim that the forbidden fruit wasn't just a metaphor for disobedience. It was symbolic of an encounter, one that left Eve with twins, Cain and Abel, born of two different fathers. This view, called dual seed theory, says Cain was literally part divine or part fallen. If that's true, then Cain wasn't entirely human, and his wife, she could have been part of a different line of beings entirely. A pre-Adamic race, perhaps. The Bible never directly rules that out. It hints, it alludes, but it never closes the case. Let's talk about Nod, the land where Cain fled. Most people assume it's just a region, but the Bible says Cain was afraid people would kill him there. Wait a minute, what people? If humanity had just started, who was he afraid of? This one verse has baffled scholars for centuries. It implies that there were already people outside the Eden narrative, people never mentioned in the creation story, outsiders. Some theologians believe that the creation story in Genesis is not the beginning of all humans, just the beginning of the covenant bloodline. In other words, Adam's line was special, not exclusive. That opens the possibility that Cain found a wife among these others in Nod. Not a sister, not a daughter of Eve, but someone else. Here's where philosophy meets mythology. Ancient Sumerian texts, older than Genesis, talk about godlike beings who created humans through hybridization. Some myths speak of the Anunnaki, who fashioned humans as workers and bred them in stages. In the Epic of Atrahasis, humanity multiplies too quickly, and the gods try to control them. Sound familiar? There's a pattern in ancient stories. Divine beings, forbidden unions, early violence, exile, and unexplained population booms. What if Genesis is one version of a global memory? What if Cain's wife was never meant to be explained? Because the answer would unravel everything. So maybe Cain's wife was his sister, or maybe she came from a forgotten people the Bible barely whispers about. Or maybe, just maybe, the story of Cain wasn't written to give us answers, but to show us how fragile those answers really are. Because buried inside that ancient narrative is a riddle about justice, guilt, legacy, and the terrifying loneliness of being the first marked man. This isn't just about Cain, it's about all of us, wandering, searching, building cities on top of questions we never dared to ask. And if one line in Genesis can crack open that much mystery, just imagine what else we've missed. Subscribe if that opened your mind. And if you're ready for the next mystery, watch this video right here, because what happened after Eden might be even stranger.